Welcome to the series Against All Odds, Crafting a Career in the Arts. According to Statistics Canada, around 19% of the population are living with some form of disability that affects their level of freedom, independence, or quality of life. Of that population, a percentage are invisibly disabled, which means they may look and act healthy but are living with a chronic condition. Having an invisible disability could happen to anyone at any time and can include autoimmune diseases, brain injuries and strokes, chronic pain, mental or psychological disorders, among others.
People with invisible disabilities may not be able to work a full-time schedule or may need a modified schedule based on how they feel. But having an invisible disability doesn't mean living your dream is completely impossible. In this series, we will share with you stories of invisibly disabled professional craft artists who work or sell their art in Edmonton. We have also included valuable community resources that are important for any artist who wants to begin their career. I'm Amy, an award-winning artist and filmmaker who is invisibly disabled. And together with my husband Tanner, I will be sharing the stories of local artists with invisible disabilities.
And I will take you to different places in the community to show you where support is available.
It is our hope that with this series, anyone looking to begin their art career will know where the supports and resources exist in our community. We also hope, if you are invisibly disabled, the stories of the artists included in this series will help you see how it is possible to have a career in the arts, or inspire you to explore the artistic medium you have been curious about.
So my name is Allison and I'm from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. And I've always lived here, except for about 2 years that I moved to Vancouver to study art therapy. And then I came back because all of my family is here and friends, and I've always loved this city. I always said, even as a child, that I was going to be an artist when I grew up. I didn't think that it was really going to be true, but here we are. So I am a mixed media artist. I started my art career by going to the University of Alberta to study fine arts. And while there, I actually started as an abstract painter and developed throughout my time there to be more of a figurative painter. I focus more on bodies, specifically queer bodies, fat bodies, and disabled bodies. My artwork has a lot of deeper meanings and messaging in it. It's very content-based, and I focus a lot on ideas about societal norms, standards of beauty, expectations around gender, and especially expectations of femininity and femme folks. So I've worked in a variety of ways, but the embroidery also specifically speaks to that history of women's work and what we're expected to be as a woman or as a femme-presenting person. I find my inspiration from a lot of different places. I'm very active in social justice activism and online communities. I find the people who I've connected with in those communities to be amazing and a lot of my inspiration, where, again, people from marginalized groups who are not just living in spite of the odds or anything like that, but who who are actively working to change the systems that we're in that are holding us back. And those types of people are who I do my work for and why I do it. There's also a lot of inspiration specifically that I garnered from my family. My grandfather was an artist, and he really supported me to be into the arts. He gave me a lot of my first sketchbooks. He gave me a lot of materials. And when he passed away when I was 19, I, as one of the only artists in the family, inherited pretty much all of his art supplies. And so while we did vastly different types of art, he was much more into architecture and sketching houses and stuff like that, nature. I found that his love of painting and his support for me as a young person to get into arts and to really take it seriously, to not just think that it's some hobby or a fun thing to do, that this could be a career, it could be something that I should be taken seriously for. All of that was imparted to me as a kid. So I earn a living as an artist by mainly exhibiting my work and through artist grants received from municipal and provincial and federal levels. These grants are towards projects, and I use those to basically make a living as an artist and exhibit my work. I do sell my pieces every once in a while, but that part isn't where I make the majority of my living from my art. I have lived with mental illness since I was a young person, since I was a kid. I've had a pretty severe anxiety disorder along with a number of other things. And as I've gotten older, I actually have chronic pain and physical disabilities on top of that. So my mobility is limited, and I have a lot of joint issues that sort of cause problems along the way. So I've struggled with a number of different things, but I've also embraced it as being part of who I am. That doesn't mean that it's everything about who I am or that I couldn't exist without it, but that it does impact every part of my life. And so I've chosen to sort of not hide it anymore, because that's part of who I am. I got into art therapy, which is one of the other things I'm trained to do, because of my own disabilities and mental health experiences. I specifically wanted to talk about how we can use art and craft especially to work with disabilities and to heal in various ways from various different things, whether it be trauma or disability or, adjustment, anything like that. So I certainly did start doing that. I found, unfortunately, that I can't practice full-time as an art therapist. I did work in social services for a number of years, and I've come to working full-time as an artist because of my disabilities as well. I found that the stress and the strain of working full-time in social services was a little bit too hard, and that I needed to step back and focus on my own mental health and to work in ways specifically that accommodated for my disabilities. And that meant not working 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. And that was a hard thing to come to terms with, especially as a young person. But my art career has made it possible for me to have a job, to make a living, to actually feel like being productive. Well, there's a lot of stuff to unpack there as well. But I'm very grateful that I've been able to be supported to make this business work, because it's hard and not everybody can do that, unfortunately. But I think that we certainly are able to if we have the tools that we need. I have a number of people in my life who support me with my work as an artist, and not just with, pep talks. My partner, my significant other, Jesse, helps me out a lot. He helps me carrying things to and from shows. He'll come and do them with me. He'll help me sell things. He'll help me set up an online store. He does a lot. And he's certainly working very hard to help me to make my art business accessible to me. So he's ensured that in our house that we set up a studio for me. I've tried having studios outside of my house and it doesn't work quite as well for me. And I also have my parents who have been very supportive. So they put me in art classes from when I was a really young kid. They've always been very supportive of my interests and my passions. And even though my whole family is in medicine, when I wanted to go to art school, that was never diminished. It was never talked about like that was not a reasonable option. And it was treated just the same as my sister who went to engineering and then on to nursing school. So we all viewed it as a valid and tangible goal to have, to be an artist, to be a working artist. My favorite medium to work in is mostly embroidery. So I started cross-stitching specifically when I was about 13 years old for a class project. And the technique of it has always just been very conducive to my mental health, to the way I work, and I find it very soothing. So I stuck with it, and when I was in art school and university, I started exploring using software to create my own patterns and to create my own images, and I made them more and more complex until I got to a place where I felt like I was communicating what I was hoping to, which again is about sort of the essence of people and these portraits capturing who they really are. And I felt like being more photorealistic for those is a part that I find really beneficial, and I think that it helps communicate that message. So the actual process of doing the stitching is a very meditative process, and I don't like to think that much. And cross-stitching sort of allows you to do a lot of the creative thinking at the beginning of the project, where you're planning, you're making what you're gonna do, you're creating your pattern, and then you just have to follow it after that. And that part is, to me, a lot different than some other art forms, because you're not necessarily constantly thinking about what's my next step, what do I have to do, what am I responding to in this picture, with painting, where you're always sort of making a mark and then looking at it and saying, okay, what do I do next? Is that good, bad, more or less, whatever. With a cross-stitch pattern, you're doing all of that at the very, very beginning of the project, putting it all into the pattern, and then you're just going. And I don't have to turn my brain on. I can just follow the pattern, and this color goes here, and this color goes here, and I've already figured everything out. And so it's a real tool that I use to help, again, regulate not only my body, but my mood as well, so that I can sort of keep more balanced. So this piece that I have here, I have about 7 stitches left on, and those last few stitches are always my favorite part, because it's when you really, even though the picture might almost be there, it might almost be full, those last few stitches of color make it final, they make it full and finished, and it's always so exciting when I get close to the end and I'm doing those last few pieces and seeing it all come together finally. So my favorite time of day to do work, especially embroidery work, is the late evening. I'm not usually much of a night owl, but when I get into a good project, my shifts end up going way later. I think it's just because everything kind of settles down at the end of the day. Like my partner, maybe he goes off to play video games or even goes to bed if he has work in the morning. And the dogs have settled down and everybody's quiet. And yeah, it's just something about that time of night that is very, again, there's nothing you have to do. You don't have to go anywhere. You're home, and it's like my anxiety dissipates when the light goes away sometimes a little bit, somewhat. As an artist, there's a lot of built-in discrimination or ableism in our systems, and especially in art institutions and businesses. So there's a lot of ways that it's ingrained in things like, well, there's certain standards for writing applications or for filling out, artist info. There's certain ways that you have to do it, but nobody tells you how to do it, and you have to figure it out on your own. And if you don't do it properly, then you never get any follow-up or feedback. Those kinds of things are really difficult. On top of that, there's things like showing up in person. The expectation that you do artist talks in person in front of a lot of different people who you've never met before in a space that may not be comfortable. All of those things are really hard for people like me, especially with specific disabilities, but it could be any number of disabilities that would be challenging for. One of the main things that I've struggled with is that my physical mobility doesn't allow me to go to in-person events often at art galleries, even my own exhibition showings. Sometimes I can't stand for long periods of time, and almost every art gallery has 0 seating. So like that kind of thing, I've been working to talk to galleries, institutions about those kinds of things and how we can make art spaces more accessible to all sorts of different people. And the art world as a whole available to not just disabled artists, which is a big part, but disabled patrons, disabled, fans, creators, family, all of those things. We want to make sure that everybody can interact with art and make art and engage in ways they want to be engaging. My art has definitely made my life better. I actually use my art to regulate my mood, to stabilize my, anxiety, the stuff I have to deal with. And I don't think I'd be able to function without my art. And so I find it really important to talk to people about the ways that we can use art to help us, and whether it be to, process things by talking about them or thinking about them, or whether it's just by calming us down. I do a lot of embroidery because I find it really meditative. It's very repetitive. I follow a pattern. I don't have to think too much. And that soothing quality is what really draws me to a lot of arts and crafts. So I find things that I can really work with my hands, where I can really pay a lot of attention to details, where I can sort of zone out and help me to manage the day-to-day experiences of living with mental illness. Defining success as an artist is one of the more complicated things. So especially when you go through the art school experience, success is often defined in a specific way about how much art you sell, or how many exhibitions you book, or how many people know your name as an artist. And while I certainly find a certain amount of satisfaction in those things, it's more about the people I'm connecting to along the way. My art is very community based, and I seek to connect to other people who have similar ideas, similar experiences, and who come from similar communities. So working with those people and sharing our stories is what I consider to be success. Just doing the things and making the art that day to day helps me to function better, that helps me actually feel better, and that maybe helps other people feel better. That's what I'm really into. And so whether or not somebody buys my work or tells me how talented I am as an artist, or whether they know who I am, means a little bit less than whether I have communicated what I intended to with my art piece, and whether somebody saw that art piece and felt that their story was seen or heard. That's what I care about. So my advice to people who are starting out in similar situations is to just make art. Just make as much stuff as you can. I struggled a lot with anxiety. I have half sketchbooks full of things where I have ripped them out. I have not started things and refused to finish them. I have a lot of blank page anxiety. And one of the things I learned in art therapy school was to get over that fear of making things that aren't perfect. And I still struggle. I'm not going to say I'm totally over it. But you can't learn, you can't get there unless you make bad art. And unless you're willing to do that. And I keep all of my art. So I have all of the ridiculous cartoons from when I was 11, and I have, the bad paintings that I was starting to do when I just started art school because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And all of those things aren't bad because they not only taught me more about art and how to be a better artist, but like they provided that foundation for me to grow. And so being afraid to make bad art just leaves you not making any art. And that's sad. I'd rather the world be full of bad art than no art. So that's how I go. So for people who are interested in becoming a professional artist, I often love to talk about connecting to local arts organizations, because that has been one of the ways that I've really been able to make this work for me. So connecting to if you have local arts councils, if you have, even national ones, those types of places can support you with grant funding. They can support you with learning how to write applications. They can support you with all sorts of different things, even buying your work sometimes to keep in their public collections. So a lot of people think that you have to make it as an artist just by selling art. And while that's a big part of it, I'm sure, there's lots of other ways to do it as well, and to build that community. There's a lot of things that people should know about invisible disabilities. The first thing, one of the ones that I think is most important, is that we're just everyday people. We're not some mythical, different section of the population. I am, your teacher or your friend or your mom or your sister or, the person at the library, all of these people. And we all deserve to be able to interact in society and with art and life in the same way that everybody else does. So because we have different needs, a lot of people think that that should be our own responsibility to fulfill, that, it's our own responsibility to deal with the challenges that we're given. But a lot of the challenges aren't things that I'm able to fix. I can't fix all of the things that aren't provided for me, that, even just chairs being provided at a gallery when you're there, or the opportunity to do a virtual artist talk instead of a in-person artist talk, I'm not always the person who has the control over those things. And more awareness, but also compassion and understanding in our communities would lead to more accessibility for all people, not just disabled people.